The sky tore open. Not with thunder, not with light, but with a violent shudder of reality itself. Hulks of black and green energy twisted and spiraled across the heavens, a rift in the very fabric of the universe. Through that impossible tear, two figures fell, one hulking and green, muscles rippling beyond human possibility, the other lean, scarred, claws flashing with anticipation. Hulk and Wolverine. Not here by choice, but by the will of something older, darker, and infinitely cruel. The air burned as they passed through the warp. Time stretched, reality bent, and every sense became a torrent of contradictory impressions. Hulk roared, not in pain, but in recognition of an instinctive fury amplified beyond reckoning. Wolverine hissed, claws extending mid-fall, feeling the shadows tugging at his very essence, whispers promising freedom, carnage, and powers that defied nature. Colors shifted and twisted, light refracted into impossible angles, and the sound of collapsing worlds seemed to echo alongside their descent. They landed hard on a jagged plateau within the Eye of Terror. The ground cracked beneath Hulk's immense weight, shards of rock and warped metal bouncing across abyssal chasms. Wolverine rolled expertly, rising to his feet with a grace that belied the chaos surrounding him. Around them, the landscape was unearthly. Twisted towers of metal, floating rocks suspended by invisible forces, rivers of energy that shimmered like liquid fire. The air itself tasted of warp taint. Every instinct screamed danger, but danger was irrelevant. Only the fight, only the rage, mattered. Hulk shook the warp residue from his massive frame, muscles coiling like coiled steel. Rara arg! The roar was not just sound, it was force, bending the edges of reality, echoing into the void where mortal ears could not hear. Wolverine's eyes glinted with the reflection of green lightning, the whispers of Slaanesh teasing his claws, promising exhilaration beyond blood and bone. Their senses sharpened, instincts synced, each movement calculated yet primal, every breath drawn in anticipation of chaos to come. They moved together instinctively, their senses acutely attuned to one another. Despite centuries apart, despite differences in mind and method, the warp had made them a single force of anticipation, a predator pairing in a world designed to test the limits of both body and spirit. They were predators in a hunting ground where the rules of nature were warped, where gravity, light, and air obeyed neither logic nor expectation. Every step they took left impressions that pulsed with energy, marking the land as theirs, signaling dominance without a word. From the chasms below, creatures stirred. Warp-spawned horrors, grotesque and fluid, flesh fused with metal, teeth stretching into impossible angles. They sensed the presence of these newcomers, Hulk's raw, unbridled rage, Wolverine's deadly precision and latent savagery. They moved forward, tendrils of warp energy writhing, their forms shifting between states of matter and nothingness. Hulk's fists clenched, cracking the plateau with a single slam. Rara arg! The energy wave hurled the first wave of warp spawn back into the void. Wolverine's claws sliced through the air, cutting tendrils of warped energy, ripping apart monstrosities before they could coalesce fully. Together, they were unstoppable, a storm of fury and skill that the eye itself recoiled from. The sky above churned with green and violet currents, the very atmosphere reacting to their presence. The whispers of the Chaos Gods slithered around them, promising greater strength, inviting submission, offering the ultimate power to rage unchecked. Hulk's muscles tensed further, feeling the pull of Khorne's fire within him. Wolverine's claws pulsed, Slaanesh's whispers stirring the predator's blood, tempting him toward exhilaration beyond morality. The air was thick with energy, smells of ozone and blood and metal mixing in a tangible, almost sentient haze. They paused briefly, the wind of the warp whipping around them. Instinctively, They recognized each other as allies and threats, a necessary union born not of friendship, but of shared survival and mutual understanding. The eye had not drawn them here for companionship. It had drawn them to test, to temper, to forge champions in chaos. From the depths of a nearby chasm, a shadow moved. Larger than any creature they had ever encountered, coated in chitin and molten metal, with eyes that burned like miniature suns. Hulk roared, sending a shockwave that rattled the warp towers. Wolverine leapt, claws flashing, slicing through the edge of the shadow. The creature recoiled but did not flee. It had been summoned, bred, and perfected for this very confrontation. They realized almost simultaneously that the Eye of Terror had brought them here for a reason. Not by accident, not by chance, but as champions of chaos, tools of destruction to be sharpened, weapons to be unleashed. Hulk's roar split the air again, deafening and full of unrestrained power. Wolverine snarled, claws humming with lethal anticipation. Around them, the Eye of Terror twisted and writhed, stars above bending, rivers of energy twisting, and the shadows of warp spawn forming into massive, impossible shapes. They were ready. They were unbound. They were chaos incarnate. The Eye itself seemed to tremble at their presence, a storm waiting to consume the Imperium itself. Every pulse of energy, every ripple in the air, felt alive, acknowledging the arrival of the two champions. And far beyond Cantus 9, across the rift, the Chaos Gods watched, smiling with anticipation, for their new instruments of ruin had arrived. The shattered world of Kael'Tor hung beneath the polluted skies, like a wound in the galaxy. Jagged mountains pierced the clouds, rivers of molten rock carved through the barren plains, and the remnants of ruined cities lay in silent testimony to centuries of war. The air smelled of ash, ozone, and scorched metal, and the ground itself seemed to shiver beneath the weight of approaching doom. From the heavens, dropships descended, carrying the disciplined soldiers of the Imperial Guard. Their banners fluttered weakly in the sulfur-streaked wind, their armor glinting under the faint light of distant suns. They were trained, armed, and ready to die for the Emperor. And yet they had never faced this. They could not comprehend the storm that had fallen from the warp. Hulk's massive feet crushed the shattered rock as he advanced, each step resonating with kinetic power that shattered the plains. His roar split the sky, a sound that carried through the mountains and valleys, turning the hearts of men into panic before they even saw him. Wolverine moved beside him, claws extended, slashing through twisted metal, shattered buildings, and the first wave of guardsmen. The whispers of Slaanesh and Khorne danced through the air, enhancing Wolverine's reflexes and Hulk's rage, binding them to the will of the Chaos Gods. The first squads of guardsmen fired, bolters spitting flames and projectiles. Hulk's fists absorbed the impact, slamming into the ground to send shockwaves that toppled tanks and shattered walls. Wolverine darted between volleys, claws tearing through armor, slicing through weapons and limbs with lethal precision. Every attack was anticipated, every strike calculated, in the chaos of instinct and rage. From the high cliffs above, commissars shouted orders, but the soldiers below were already losing cohesion. The ground shook, structures collapsed, and fire spread in all directions. The iron-willed regiments attempted to form defensive lines, but Hulk's charge cleaved them in half, Wolverine striking from angles no human mind could anticipate. The first blood of the day spilled freely, turning the ashen plains into rivers of red, steaming in the heat of devastation. Despite the chaos, the two champions moved in silent coordination. Hulk was the hammer, Wolverine the blade. The world itself became their arena, warping around them in subtle bends as reality struggled to contain their strength. Even the planet seemed to acknowledge their dominance, shivering and pulsing in resonance with the iron rage that flowed through Hulk and the predatory will of Wolverine. A squad of Leman Russ tanks advanced, their treads tearing through rock, cannons firing with deadly accuracy. Hulk's roar split the air. He leapt, landing atop a tank and crushing it in one swing. Wolverine vaulted onto another, claws tearing through its hull and crew alike. The explosions lit the sky in flashes of fire and molten metal, the sound echoing across the shattered plains like the growl of some primal god. The warp itself rippled in response. Purple and green energy tore across the battlefield, whispering promises of power, feeding the champions' rage. Every step they took left devastation in their wake, burning fields, shattered mountains, and rivers of molten stone bending unnaturally. The Imperial Guard had faced horrors before, but never a force so calculated, so unstoppable, so utterly devoted to destruction. Hulk's massive fists slammed into a formation of infantry, sending men and weapons flying through the air. Wolverine leapt, slicing through chains of enemies before they could regroup. Their attacks were brutal, yet precise, a deadly ballet of rage and skill. Every guard that survived a moment longer than expected did so only to be caught by another sweeping strike. Even the weapons of the Imperium, bolters and flammers alike, seemed inadequate against the combined fury of the two Chaos champions. Above them, the sky darkened further as warp energy gathered. A low rumble spread across the mountains, the whisper of unseen horrors amplifying the raw power of Hulk and Wolverine. The chaos of the environment mirrored the chaos of their minds, yet their instincts kept them perfectly aligned. They were a singular force, unstoppable and merciless, manifested in flesh, fury, and steel. The last remnants of the Imperial Guard attempted to retreat, but even in flight, they were no match. Hulk's leap shattered the rear ranks, Wolverine darting ahead, cutting off avenues of escape with surgical precision. The dead world of Khorne became a testament to the might of chaos incarnate, the mountains groaning, the rivers boiling, the ground split under the weight of their passage. In the midst of the carnage, Hulk paused briefly, muscles coiled, chest heaving, his eyes scanning the horizon for more opposition. Wolverine crouched beside him, claws dripping with blood, snarling as his senses detected even the faintest movements. For a moment, the two champions were silent, the air itself reverberating with anticipation, the eye of terror acknowledging its new agents of destruction. They had arrived. They had fought. And the world had bent, bled, and shattered under their hands. Hulk roared again, a sound that seemed to resonate across the very fabric of the warp, and Wolverine's claws gleamed in response, a silent signal of fury and readiness. The Eye had chosen its champions, and the Imperium would remember the first blood they shed. The air above Khorne shimmered with unnatural energy. The sky, twisted by the rift through which Hulk and Wolverine had arrived, burned green and violet, streaked with currents of warped light that seemed to move with intent. The Eye of Terror was alive, its tendrils of corruption reaching out to touch the two newcomers. And they were listening. From the endless void, voices whispered. Not words in any human language, but threads of thought, emotion, and temptation woven into the fabric of reality. Khorne's growl echoed through Hulk's mind, a pulse of rage that promised unparalleled fury, strength enough to crush entire worlds with a single swing. Rage is power, rage is dominance, it hissed. The primal fire of bloodlust surged within him, making his already unstoppable fury feel infinite. Slaynish's whispers caressed Wolverine's senses, soft, tantalizing, yet dangerous. It promised speed beyond instinct, precision beyond thought, an ecstasy of pain and pleasure intertwined with lethality. Release, embrace the predator within, it murmured. The smell of metal, ozone, and blood became intoxicating. Every nerve, every muscle, every reflex seemed heightened. Every slash of his claws, every leap, every strike, now danced to a melody of chaos. Hulk shook the whispers from his mind momentarily, but each heartbeat resonated with the god's encouragement. He was aware of the choice, the pull toward ultimate power, but he did not yet surrender fully. The rage that Khorne offered was intoxicating, but it came at a cost that Hulk could feel in the marrow of his bones. Wolverine's claws flexed as he prowled the shattered plains. Slaanesh whispered again, closer this time, a subtle tug at his instincts, an invitation to abandon restraint and let the predator fully awaken. His senses screamed for blood, for destruction, for domination. But he hesitated, calculating, analyzing, even as the lure of pleasure and power nipped at the edge of reason. The two champions moved across Khale Tor like predators through a hunting ground. The wreckage of Imperial Guard formations littered the plains, tanks toppled, fortifications shattered, soldiers either fleeing or broken. Every step Hulk took sent shockwaves through the desolate world, dust and rock suspended in the energy of his rage. Wolverine's claws tore through debris, metal and stone, yielding to the predator's precision. The eye itself pulsed in response, each ripple of the warp feeding the whispers, enhancing the offers of power. "Why do you resist?" the voices asked. Khorne's thunder rolled in Hulk's mind, Slaanesh's caress danced in Wolverine's senses. "Power is yours for the taking. Why fight what you are destined to become?" Hulk roared, defiance echoing through the warped landscape. He slammed a boulder-sized rock into a squad of fleeing guardsmen, sending them tumbling and scattering in all directions. This is my fury," he bellowed mentally, pushing against Khorne's pull. The whispers faltered slightly, as if impressed by the raw, unshaped defiance. Wolverine leapt onto a ruined wall, claws slicing through armored infantry before they could react. "Control," he thought, teeth gritted. "Precision. Discipline. I am more than this, than you think." Slaanesh's voice wriggled closer, a coiling of sensation and temptation, but Logan's instincts, sharpened over centuries, resisted, anchoring him to his purpose. Chaos itself began to manifest physically. Warp energy coalesced into shapes around them, shadows writhing like living serpents, colors shifting impossibly, and whispers becoming almost tangible threads. They reached out, brushing against Hulk's fists, Wolverine's claws, demanding surrender, testing their limits, exploring the edge of mortality. The champions felt it, the subtle tug at soul and mind, the allure of absolute power. Worlds could be shattered, armies destroyed, galaxies bent to their will. And yet, the Eye of Terror demanded more than submission. It demanded choice. Hulk's muscles tensed, heart beating with raw, limitless potential. "Ra-erg," he bellowed into the void, not in defiance, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement that he alone would shape how that power was used. Wolverine's claws gleamed in the shifting light, his senses scanning, calculating, anticipating. He let the whispers flow through his mind, not as commands, not as temptation, but as information. The knowledge of what could be, the danger, the risk, the reward. For a brief moment, the world fell silent. The whispers stopped, the warp paused, the eye held its breath. The champions were still, standing on the broken plains of Khale Tor, listening, feeling, understanding the magnitude of their choices. Chaos had offered them power beyond comprehension. They had felt the pull of gods. And yet, they had not yielded. Hulk flexed his fists, the green of his skin almost glowing beneath the storm of warp energy. Wolverine crouched beside him, claws shimmering faintly with warp-infused light. Together, they were aware that this was only the beginning. The whispers were not threats, not merely temptation. They were invitations, challenges, a test of what they would become. The Eye of Terror watched, patient and deliberate, as two champions of raw potential prepared to carve their path. The world had felt their rage. The warp had recognized their fury, and the whispers of chaos lingered, promising what was yet to come. They had survived the first temptation. They had resisted, barely, and in doing so, they had become more than mortals. They had become instruments, alive with the potential to shape, destroy, and command. The eye waited, and so did the galaxy. The world of Kale Tor trembled beneath Hulk's massive steps. Each movement of the green giant sent fissures through the cracked plains, and rivers of molten rock boiled where his feet had landed. The eye of terror pulsed around him, tendrils of warp energy curling toward his massive frame, whispering promises of power, blood, and dominion. Hulk could feel it, a fire igniting deep within, a rage older and more feral than anything he had ever known. The whispers of Khorne, coarse and thunderous, resonated in his mind. Rage is strength. Rage is purpose. Rage is conquest. Each thought struck with clarity, clarity sharpened to the edge of violence. Hulk's muscles coiled like living steel, his eyes glowing brighter, pupils flaring with the reflection of unseen fires. The raw fury he had always possessed was being magnified, refined, and focused by the will of a god of war. Wolverine moved beside him, senses alert. The air shimmered with the warp's influence, threads of Khorne's rage brushing against his mind. He hissed through clenched teeth as he noticed Hulk's movements, powerful, calculated, but no longer entirely his own. The Green Titan's fury was no longer just instinct. It was shaped, honed, and bound to something larger, something ancient and merciless. The ground beneath them trembled as Hulk lifted a boulder, crushing it with a roar that echoed through the fractured mountains. "Hulk, focus," Wolverine growled, claws extended. "This isn't just a fight. It's the warp feeding him, shaping him." But the words barely reached him. Hulk's rage had become a conduit, a vessel for Khorne's will, and it demanded obedience. Every impulse, every movement, every strike was a tool of war beyond mortal comprehension. From the shattered plains, the remnants of Imperial Guard forces attempted to regroup. Tanks fired, bolters roared, and ordnance exploded. Hulk barely noticed. A swing of his fist shattered the first line of defense, sending men and machines flying in arcs of molten rock and flame. Each explosion fed the fire inside him, amplifying his rage further, until he felt unstoppable, a living avatar of wrath and violence. Wolverine darted between the chaos, sensing the subtle shift in Hulk's demeanor. The anger was no longer his ally. It had become a weapon wielded by Khorne himself. Yet Logan's instincts kept him alert, moving with lethal grace, attacking only when necessary, observing, calculating, resisting the taint that tugged at his own soul. The eye of terror pulsed again, its tendrils wrapping around the battlefield, each pulse feeding Hulk's fury, turning instinct into divine wrath, strength into absolute destruction. Hulk's skin seemed to shimmer in response, muscles bulging impossibly, veins of raw power glowing beneath emerald flesh. Every step sent shockwaves across the battlefield, every roar split the air like a living weapon. Even the rivers of molten rock twisted, boiled, and writhed under the resonance of his rage. The chaos whispers grew louder, coiling around Wolverine now, offering him the thrill of unrestrained savagery. But Logan resisted, claws snapping, movements precise, dodging debris, slicing enemies, avoiding the magnetic pull of Khorne's influence. His senses were heightened, aware of the subtle signs of warp manipulation, recognizing that Hulk was no longer entirely himself, and that the battle for control had begun. Hulk's roar split the air once more, and the first victims of his fully awakened rage were Imperial Guard units attempting to flee. Bolts of energy arced from destroyed vehicles, ricocheting harmlessly off the shockwaves he created. Hulk's fists and feet became instruments of destruction, each movement a note in the symphony of carnage conducted by Khorne himself. The Green Titan lifted a fallen Titan chassis effortlessly, hurling it across the plains with enough force to crater the earth, leaving screams and molten debris in its wake. Wolverine's claws flashed, cutting through warped armor, dispatching squads that thought themselves safe in the chaos. Yet every move, every swing, every strike from Hulk reflected the will of Khorne, the god of war guiding his rage into perfection, and Wolverine could feel the weight of it pressing against him, testing his resolve, threatening to bend him into submission. Hulk paused only for a heartbeat, eyes scanning the battlefield, nostrils flaring. The anger within him roared, demanding obedience, demanding blood, destruction, and worship. He lifted his fists, a single motion that sent a tremor across the battlefield, and the earth itself seemed to respond, rocks and molten streams shifting in deference to the godly fury within him. Wolverine crouched low, claws extended, ready to strike at anything that threatened balance, his senses taut, attuned to the subtle changes in Hulk's behavior. He knew the time would come when they would either conquer the corruption or be consumed by it. And that moment was approaching faster than either could anticipate. The Eye of Terror itself seemed to pulse in anticipation, as if pleased with its new instrument of destruction. Hulk had crossed the threshold. His rage was no longer just fury. It was divinity forged in anger, bound to Khorne's will, and the first blood of Kael'tor had been shed. The air above Kael'tor shimmered with whispers, subtle and invasive. They slithered through the rocks, seeped into the air, and coiled around Wolverine's mind like invisible serpents. Slaanesh spoke in tones that were almost musical, a cadence that teased his instincts, awakened sensations long buried beneath discipline and memory. Every nerve in Logan's body shivered in response. Pain and pleasure became inseparable, anticipation and violence intertwined, forming a rhythm that called to the predator inside him. He crouched on a ridge, claws extended, senses straining. The battlefield sprawled below him, shattered infantry, molten rivers, and twisted wreckage. Hulk was ahead, a green god of rage, his fury magnified by Khorne's pull. Wolverine felt it echo in him, the raw power of anger demanding his attention, but Slaanesh's whispers added another layer: speed, precision, exhilaration, a promise of domination that went beyond the physical, into ecstasy. Logan's claws hummed in the energy of the warp. He leapt down, moving between twisted wreckage and collapsed infantry, slicing through armored legs, dismembering the first wave of retreating guardsmen. Every strike was perfect, each movement calculated by instinct yet enhanced by the chaos of Slaanesh's touch. The predator inside him purred, thrilled by the taste of battle, by the scent of fear, blood, and sweat. And yet, he resisted, holding on to the fragments of discipline that had survived countless wars, countless lifetimes of memory and restraint. Hulk's massive fists shattered a tank in the distance, and the shockwave rattled Wolverine's senses. He moved with fluid grace, claws slashing through servitors and machines, synchronizing instinct with the pull of the whispers, balancing temptation with purpose. Every step brought him closer to abandoning control, to giving in entirely to the pleasure of blood and carnage. Slaanesh's voice slithered through his mind again, softer now, almost a caress. You can be more than predator. You can be perfection. Feel the ecstasy of your claws, the delight in your destruction. Hunger, desire, power, all within your grasp. Logan's jaw tightened. He hissed, teeth bared, claws flashing. No, he thought, deliberate and steady. I am not yours. Yet the whisper tugged at him, reminding him of every thrill he had ever felt, every thrill tied to violence, to death, to survival. He could not ignore it entirely. To do so would be unnatural, impossible. And yet he fought. The Eye of Terror responded. The sky above rippled with energy, colors twisting impossibly, green and violet, black and gold, each tendril of warp moving as if alive, observing, measuring. It had seen Hulk fall first to rage, felt Khorne's influence mold his fury into perfect obedience, and now it tested Wolverine to see if he would succumb or resist. Logan leapt across the battlefield, moving through explosions and falling debris, the world around him bending subtly to the touch of the warp. Each enemy he struck was simultaneously destroyed and toyed with, the pleasure of violence seeping into him in flashes, a sensation almost impossible to resist. The predator inside him flexed, urging submission, but his mind, honed over lifetimes of war, fought back with clarity, discipline, and focus. He moved like a shadow, a lethal blur of claws and instincts, attacking both guardsmen and the remnants of corrupted servitors. The battlefield became a blur, a ballet of chaos and precision. Every swing, every leap, every strike reflected not just instinct, but conscious choice, resisting Slaynish's seduction even while drawing power from it. Hulk roared nearby, a green wave of pure fury that echoed across the plains. Wolverine responded in kind, a low growl of readiness, senses synchronizing with his companion's rage, moving fluidly between battlefield and enemy. Yet the whispers persisted, coiling tighter, tugging at hidden desires, promising ecstasy in the shedding of blood and bone. Logan felt it, the edge of surrender, the pull of indulgence, but he balanced it against purpose, against the necessity of survival. Each strike became deliberate, not just a kill, but a message to the eye itself. I am my own. I am the predator, not the puppet. The landscape trembled with each of Hulk's attacks, the shattered mountains quivering under the fury of his rage, but Wolverine's steps were precise, measured, and terrifyingly efficient. He could feel Slaynish's excitement, thrilled by the predator's restraint, and the whispers sharpened, testing him further, attempting to twist discipline into desire. At last, the battlefield quieted for a heartbeat. Hulk flexed, muscles coiled, chest heaving, eyes blazing emerald, fully bound to Khorne's rage. Wolverine crouched nearby, claws shimmering, breathing evenly, senses alert, heart pounding with adrenaline and defiance. He had survived the first true test. The whispers had reached for him. They had tempted him. And he had resisted, partially, but enough to retain control, enough to remain his own master. The eye of terror pulsed in approval. It had found its champions. Hulk was the fury unbound, and Wolverine, still restrained, still cunning, was the predator who could choose when to strike and when to resist. The warp around them simmered with potential, threads of chaos energy weaving through the jagged landscape, awaiting the next step, the next temptation, the next test. The stage was set. The champions had tasted power, and the whispers of chaos promised more. Khorne Tor lay in ruins, its rivers boiling, its mountains broken, its soldiers scattered, and the Eye of Terror had begun its work. Hulk and Wolverine had survived. But survival was only the beginning. The whispers would return. And soon, the predators would awaken fully. The wind above Khorne Tor howled with a sound not born of nature. It carried the echoes of the warp, 1,000 whispers layered atop one another, each thread pulsing with desire, rage, and temptation. Hulk's massive form towered over the shattered plains, muscles coiled like living steel, veins glowing faintly with Khorne's blessing. Wolverine crouched nearby, claws extended, senses alert, his body trembling with the residual pull of Slaynish's whispers. The battlefield around them, a testament to devastation, lay quiet for a heartbeat, as if the world itself awaited what would come next. The Chaos Gods were not content with mere corruption. They sought fusion, synthesis, a unity of unbridled rage and lethal precision, an entity that could serve as their champion across the stars. Threads of energy wrapped around Hulk's consciousness, coiling into his instincts and amplifying his fury, while shadows of Slaanesh danced within Logan's mind, teasing, tempting, sharpening the predator's edge. Hulk roared, a sound that split the very air, echoing across mountains, canyons, and rivers of molten rock. The roar was more than fury. It was the warp itself acknowledging its vessel, infusing him with a surge of power that made every movement feel unstoppable. Wolverine darted forward, claws flashing, his strikes precise and lethal, synchronized instinctively with the Green Titan beside him. Chaos threaded their wills together subtly at first, pushing Hulk toward controlled rage and Logan toward focused savagery. The pull of the warp was intoxicating. Hulk felt it in every sinew, a fire that could consume mountains, armies, and entire worlds. Wolverine felt it as well, a thrill coursing through his veins, urging him to abandon restraint entirely. Yet, unlike Hulk, Logan's mind fought back, drawing on centuries of training, memories, and instinctual discipline. The Eye of Terror reacted, threads of warp energy coiling and twisting around the two warriors. It observed, measured, and applied its influence, aligning the champions in a way that would make them unstoppable. Hulk's fist struck a ruined tank, shattering it into molten fragments, while Wolverine slashed through the supporting infantry, his movements fluid and deliberate. The warp's energy connected to both of them, melding fury and precision into a singular rhythm. Hulk's roar pulsed through the warp currents, echoing in Logan's mind, synchronizing instinct and reflex. For a moment, the chaos of rage and the Predator's precision fused perfectly, creating a rhythm both terrifying and beautiful. The earth trembled beneath them, rivers boiled, mountains cracked, and the sky shivered in response. The first true bond had been formed, one not of friendship, but of shared chaos, shared power, and mutual survival. Imperial Guard forces attempted to regroup, but even the sight of the two champions moving in perfect coordination caused panic. Hulk smashed through barricades, Wolverine darted between explosions and debris, cutting down all who dared oppose them. The warp amplified every motion, feeding energy into their actions, enhancing strength, speed, and reflexes beyond mortal comprehension. Chaos whispers urged them further, promising absolute power if they surrendered fully. Hulk flexed, bellowing into the sky, green fury blazing in every muscle, a pulse of raw strength that Khorne's voice guided toward perfection. Wolverine hissed, claws gleaming, moving with a predator's grace sharpened by Slaanesh's seductive touch. And yet, they acted together, a fusion of rage and lethality controlled by instinct and newly formed awareness. The Eye of Terror pulsed violently. Warp energy surged, connecting the two champions more tightly. Hulk's rage became more focused, precise, and controlled. Logan's predator instincts became faster, deadlier, and more anticipatory. The battlefield bent to their combined will, shifting subtly to accommodate their power, making their actions seamless, unstoppable, inevitable. A Lehman Russ tank attempted to fire from the rear. Hulk leapt, crushing it effortlessly, while Wolverine vaulted onto a fallen barricade, claws ripping the remaining crew to shreds. Every move was enhanced, every strike magnified by the bond forged by chaos. The first wave of Imperial forces fell before them, scattering in terror, leaving Kael Tor's ashen plains awash in devastation. For a brief moment, the two warriors paused. They were aware of the bond now, the invisible thread of power, fury, and instinct connecting them. Hulk's chest heaved with controlled rage, Logan's claws dripped, ready for the next wave of enemies. The whispers of the Chaos Gods lingered, promising even more, urging full submission, yet the bond itself was now independent, a fusion of unbound rage and calculated savagery. The Eye of Terror seemed to acknowledge it. It pulsed in approval, its threads of warp energy coiling in harmony with Hulk and Wolverine. They had become more than two champions. They were a single, fused force of chaos. Their combined presence radiated through the shattered plains, a storm of destruction and predation that the galaxy would remember. They had survived the temptations, resisted partial corruption, and yet they had grown stronger because of it. The whispers of chaos had fused them, rage and precision, fury and calculation, strength and instinct. Hulk roared again, Wolverine's claws flashed in response, and together, they were no longer two, but one unstoppable force. The Eye of Terror watched, patient and deliberate. The champions had been forged anew, their bonds sealed in blood, rage, and will. The next challenge awaited, and the galaxy itself would soon feel the consequences. The hive world of Varkos Prime sprawled beneath a sky choked with smoke and ash. Its towering spires rose like jagged teeth from a scarred and polluted surface, plumes of noxious gas curling into the heavy air. The streets were narrow, winding, and choked with rubble. The population scurried like vermin, aware of the growing storm above. Hulk and Wolverine had arrived, their fusion of rage and precision amplified by the will of the Chaos Gods, their presence alone bending reality to their unholy rhythm. From orbit, the planet's defense fleets responded. Strike cruisers fired lances of energy, and orbital bombardments ignited sections of the hive with fire and molten metal. But nothing could reach the champions quickly enough. Hulk descended first, crashing through the upper city levels, massive fists smashing stone and steel, sending entire platforms collapsing into the streets below. The ground shuddered with each step, tremors echoing through the city's underlevels, igniting panic and terror among the citizens. Wolverine moved beside him, fluid, predatory, unstoppable. Claws extended, he sliced through armored vehicles and security forces with deadly efficiency. Slaynish's whispers tickled his mind, heightening his reflexes, urging him to embrace the thrill of violence while maintaining the precision of a predator. He did not hesitate, did not falter, his every strike calculated to kill swiftly, to leave the survivors terrified, to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Hulk roared, a pulse of raw fury that shattered windows, collapsed walls, and sent Imperial Guard units flying. His green form towered over the panicked civilians, veins glowing with divine rage bestowed by Khorne. Each swing, each stomp, each bellow of anger amplified by the warp, turning the hive world into a crucible of destruction. The people screamed, some dying instantly beneath falling debris, others thrown to the streets in agony, their terror feeding the energy that coiled around the champions. The hive authorities attempted coordination. Regiments of the Imperial Guard formed defensive lines, bolters firing in coordinated bursts, flammers igniting debris, but every move was anticipated. Hulk's fists split the ranks, sending soldiers flying into molten rubble, while Wolverine darted between the chaos, claws ripping through armor and flesh, leaving the enemy incapacitated before they could respond. Above them, the warp pulsed visibly, rivers of green and violet energy swirling around the city spires. The whispers of the Chaos Gods entwined, Slaynish and Khorne murmuring promises and commands, feeding the champions' power, sharpening instincts, amplifying their fusion of rage and precision. The sky itself seemed to bend, distorting perception, making it impossible to gauge distances or anticipate movement. Within the chaos, a group of civilian leaders attempted to flee to the upper spires. They carried data caches, communications devices, and precious relics of the Imperium. Hulk's roar shattered the stairways beneath them, sending columns of people crashing into rubble. Wolverine cut a path through the remaining guards, slashing engines, guardsmen, and servitors alike. The whispers urged him further, offering the exhilaration of unrestrained predation, yet he tempered his actions to maintain efficiency, a predator moving through a forest of chaos, calculating every strike. The population's screams and cries filled the air, echoing through the twisted streets and abandoned buildings. Hulk's rage surged with every death, every collapse, every shattering of steel and stone. Khorne's influence sharpened, focused, binding the Green Titan's fury into an instrument of divine destruction. The people of Varkos Prime felt the presence of gods, though they did not comprehend the origin. Half of them fell to the ground in worship, pleading for mercy or salvation from powers they could not understand. The other half died. The champions moved in synchrony. Hulk smashed through the central marketplace, leveling trade platforms and power generators. Wolverine followed, cutting down resistance, stripping weaponry, and leaving chaos in his wake. Together, they were unstoppable, a living storm of muscle, claws, and warp-enhanced fury. The energy of the Eye of Terror coalesced around them, thrumming through the streets, the buildings, and the fleeing citizens. Every footstep, every swipe, every roar reinforced the bond forged in the previous battles, merging rage and precision into a singular destructive purpose. By the time the first Imperial reinforcements arrived, Hulk and Wolverine had carved a path through the Hive's upper districts. The lower streets burned, smoke rising into the warp-tainted sky. Survivors either pledged themselves to chaos, trembling before their new masters, or fell, crushed under the unstoppable force that had come from the warp. Hulk's roar shattered the final barricade, Wolverine's claws flashed, slicing the remaining defenders. The Eye of Terror pulsed with satisfaction, its tendrils wrapping around the Hive, binding it subtly to the champion's will. The two warriors had become more than mortals. They were living avatars of the Chaos God's design, their power acknowledged by the very warp itself. The ruins of Varkos Prime lay in ruin. Rivers of molten metal flowed through shattered streets, buildings tilted at impossible angles, and smoke rose like pillars into the corrupted sky. The survivors were few, trembling, either pledging themselves in worship or hiding in terror. The champions paused briefly, scanning the devastation, aware of the power they now wielded, the fusion of fury and instinct strengthened by chaos itself. Hulk's chest heaved with fury, eyes glowing emerald, muscles taut with energy. Wolverine crouched beside him, claws dripping, senses fully aware of the world and the whispers around him. They were ready for the next challenge, the next wave of enemies, the next test that the Eye of Terror would send. Chaos had begun its work. The bond of blood and fury was growing, and the galaxy would soon remember the name of the two champions who brought a world to its knees. The ruins of Varkos Prime smoldered beneath a sky thick with green and violet warp energy. The stench of burning metal and ash lingered in the air, mixing with the faint hum of the Eye of Terror as it pulsed, alive and watchful. Hulk and Wolverine stood amid the devastation, their presence commanding, undeniable, a fusion of raw rage and predatory precision. They had become more than warriors. They had become symbols, avatars of chaos incarnate, and the people, terrified, awed, and desperate, began to take notice. From the shattered streets, whispers began to spread. The surviving citizens, many trembling with fear, saw Hulk's green fury as a divine force, unbound and unstoppable. Wolverine's claws, precise and lethal, were interpreted as instruments of judgment, an executioner sent by gods beyond mortal comprehension. Those who survived the onslaught spoke in hushed tones, words forming prayers and chants, not out of devotion to the Imperium, but in awe and terror of the champions themselves. Small groups gathered, first in hidden corners, then on the open streets, painting crude symbols of claws and fists, marking buildings with scorch lines, green stains, and warped energy residues. The Eye of Terror itself seemed to reinforce their devotion, pulsing through the symbols, imbuing them with faint energy that tingled against skin and mind. The whispers of Khorne and Slaanesh, subtle yet insistent, coiled around the hearts of these worshippers, urging them to elevate Hulk and Wolverine beyond mere mortals. Hulk flexed, fists clenching as rubble shifted beneath him. Every step he took seemed to resonate with unseen power, drawing attention, feeding the fascination of the survivors. Wolverine prowled the streets, eyes sharp, claws dripping with blood, his presence commanding precision and fear. Together, they moved as one, a dual embodiment of chaos, unintentionally inspiring reverence and dread in equal measure. The first formal adherents emerged from the shadows. They wore tattered uniforms and scavenged armor, their eyes wide with devotion and madness. They knelt before Hulk and Wolverine, trembling, offering crude weapons and stolen relics as tributes. Some wept, some prayed, some laughed with the unhinged joy of those who had glimpsed a power they could not comprehend. A survivor stepped forward, voice shaking. "Great Fury, Great Claw, we see you as our savior. We are yours to command. Show us the path of strength." Hulk merely roared, a low, resonant vibration that shook stone and steel. The sound carried weight, authority, inevitability. Wolverine hissed, claws flexing, eyes scanning for threats, but the subtle acknowledgement of the worshippers' fear and awe gave the predator a strange satisfaction. They were alive. They were tools. And yet, even in submission, there was a recognition of power. Word of the champion's deeds and the emergence of the cult spread rapidly. The remnants of the population, scattered across Varkos Prime, found themselves drawn to the symbols and whispered promises of glory, or they fled in terror, abandoning cities and fleeing to the ruins. The Eye of Terror pulsed stronger, threads of warp energy weaving through the crowd, amplifying devotion, fear, and ambition alike. The cult was growing, not by design, but by the irresistible force of awe and terror combined. In hidden chambers, warp-corrupted psychers and adepts began recording the feats of Hulk and Wolverine. They sketched, scribed, and whispered the stories into codices that would later survive in scattered fragments. Each tale elevated the champions further, turning acts of destruction into divine signs, turning rage and killing into a litany of worship. Rituals began to form, sacrifices of simulacra, chanting in sync with the distorted rhythm of the warp, all dedicated to the fury and precision of the two champions. Hulk and Wolverine continued their path, moving through the city as oblivious arbiters of chaos. Every stomp, every leap, every slash seemed to confirm their divinity. The cult followed silently, imitating movements, offering homage, a procession of fear and devotion winding through the shattered streets. The Eye of Terror pulsed once more, sensing the emerging hierarchy of devotion, the structure forming within chaos. Khorne's influence deepened in Hulk, solidifying his rage into unstoppable force. Slaanesh's touch lingered in Wolverine, making his strikes faster, more precise, more intoxicatingly lethal. Together, they were not just champions. They were the nucleus of a religion of chaos, an order born from destruction, fueled by worship and terror alike. The planet quivered beneath them. Even the terrain seemed to bow to the emergence of the cult. Towers twisted subtly, rivers of molten rock flowed with a sense of alignment, and shadows of warp energy danced across the spires, acknowledging the new hierarchy. Hulk flexed, fists resonating with divine force. Wolverine crouched, claws glinting with anticipation. They were aware, now, of the power they inspired. The whispers of the chaos gods wrapped around them, guiding, tempting, sharpening their instincts, but the cult had already begun to act independently. Devotion, fear, and awe were no longer mere tools. They were a force shaping the world around them. The Eye of Terror watched in silent anticipation, threads of warp energy pulsing like veins through the city. The champions had become not just warriors, but idols, instruments of chaos, living embodiments of rage and precision. And the cult, a congregation of fear, reverence, and blood, had risen to follow them. Hulk roared, and the sound rippled through the hearts of the worshippers. Wolverine's claws flashed in response, a signal of lethal readiness. The cult cheered silently in the shadows, their allegiance sealed in awe, terror, and devotion. The world had bent. The champions had risen. And the galaxy would soon learn the names of the two who inspired a religion of chaos. The air above Varkos Prime trembled with anticipation. Smoke, fire, and warp taint mixed into a haze that blurred reality, casting the ruined hive city in surreal, shifting light. From orbit, dropships pierced the murky atmosphere, releasing squads of the Emperor's finest, loyalist space marines. Their power armor gleamed faintly in the green and violet luminescence of the warp, their banners snapping in the sulfur-streaked wind. They had been dispatched to contain the chaos, to stop the unholy champions who had brought the hive world to its knees. And they believed they could. Hulk's green form loomed in the ruined plazas, muscles coiled, rage amplified by Khorne's will. Wolverine crouched nearby, claws extended, eyes glinting with lethal precision, Slaanisha's whispers teasing the edges of his mind, sharpening instincts beyond mortal comprehension. The two champions surveyed the approaching marines, each reading movement, strategy, and intent in the slight shifts of armor and the staccato of bolter fire. This was not just a confrontation. It was a test, an opportunity to demonstrate why the Chaos Gods had claimed them. The first wave of Astartes landed with disciplined precision, their servos hissing, power packs glowing, bolters primed. They advanced in tactical formations, calculating angles, cover, and optimal fire patterns. But Hulk and Wolverine were no ordinary foes. Hulk leapt forward first, smashing through a reinforced barricade with a single, devastating swing. Shockwaves radiated outward, tossing Marines into shattered walls and molten debris. Wolverine followed, moving like a predator through the chaos, claws slicing through armor and weaponry with terrifying speed. Each strike was precise, deliberate, lethal. The battlefield became a blur of motion and destruction. Hulk's fists smashed tanks and sent bolters spinning through the air, each blow reverberating through the plaza with divine force. Wolverine darted through the ranks, anticipating every counterattack, turning the Astartes' discipline against them. Even the enhanced reflexes and psychic training of the Space Marines were insufficient against the fusion of Khorne's fury and Slaanisha's seductive precision. Bolters roared. Chain's words shredded reinforced doors. Flammers spat fire across molten streets. But Hulk absorbed the impact of the attacks with ease, sending shockwaves back through the enemy lines. Wolverine moved between the chaos, cutting down squads before they could regroup, his senses attuned to every movement, every vibration, every heartbeat. The first wave fell quickly. Hulk's roar echoed across the ruined spires, rattling weapons and shaking the terrain itself. Wolverine's claws flashed with predatory grace, ripping through power armor as if it were paper. The Astartes were professional, disciplined, and deadly, but against the champions, they were instruments of spectacle, falling to fury and precision beyond their capacity to withstand. From the shadows, tactical commanders shouted orders, but the battlefield's chaos made coordination nearly impossible. The terrain itself had become hostile, warped by the energy of the champions and the surrounding warp currents. Hulk smashed through artillery placements, sending shells and debris into the air like deadly confetti. Wolverine scaled the walls of a ruined fortress, leaping into the ranks of guardsmen, slicing with deadly efficiency, the warp's whispers urging him onward. The warp responded to their fusion. Khorne's fire pulsed in Hulk's veins, Slaanisha's ecstasy sharpened Wolverine's senses. Together, they moved as one, unstoppable, a hurricane of strength and skill. Every space marine that attempted to stand against them was thrown back, incapacitated, or destroyed. The champions were living instruments of chaos, their actions precise yet devastating, their bond cemented through destruction and divine influence. Even the terrain seemed to acknowledge their dominance. Walls shattered under Hulk swings. Rubble fell in precise arcs that cleared paths for Wolverine. Fires burned brighter where rage and precision met. The sounds of battle, bolters, explosions, and screams mixed with the warp's hum, creating a symphony of destruction orchestrated by the two champions. Hulk paused briefly to survey the battlefield. His chest heaved, muscles coiled, eyes blazing. Wolverine crouched beside him, claws ready, senses attuned to every movement. They had crushed the first wave with brutal efficiency, demonstrating not just strength, but strategic coordination, a synthesis of raw fury and predatory calculation. The remaining Astartes hesitated. The dead and the injured littered the streets. The whispers of chaos lingered, reinforcing fear and awe, amplifying the fusion of rage and precision within the champions. The eye of terror pulsed in acknowledgement. Hulk and Wolverine had proven themselves once again. They were not mere mortals. They were living avatars of chaos. The world of Varkos Prime had fallen under their shadow. The Imperium's finest had been tested and found wanting. And as Hulk roared, a sound that resonated through the very fabric of the warp, and Wolverine's claws gleamed in response, the stage was set for a war the galaxy would never forget. The sky above Varkos Prime pulsed with unnatural light. Green and violet tendrils of warp energy twisted across the horizon, the air thick with the hum of unseen power. Hulk and Wolverine stood at the heart of the ruined Hive City, their presence amplified by the eye of terror itself. The ground trembled beneath Hulk's feet, and Wolverine's claws gleamed with anticipation. They had already left devastation in their wake, but the Chaos Gods were not yet satisfied. They sought more, the ultimate communion of rage, blood, and psychic energy. From the warp, voices emerged. Not words as mortals knew them, but layers of thought, emotion, and raw intent. Khorne's growl resonated in Hulk's mind, not just a whisper, but a physical sensation like molten iron flowing through every muscle. Rage, strength, blood, glory. Each heartbeat intensified, each breath surged with the promise of annihilation. Slaanesh reached Wolverine in waves of tantalizing energy, a caress and a threat intertwined. Speed beyond instinct, reflexes sharper than thought, the thrill of destruction without consequence. Feel it, embrace it, become the predator perfected. The whispers entwined with the warp itself, threads of energy threading through every nerve, every sense, promising power far beyond mortal comprehension. Hulk flexed his massive fists, feeling the surge. Every swing of his arms now carried the weight of Khorne's will. Rocks shattered, buildings cracked, air itself bending beneath his roar. The champions had become living conduits, vessels for divine chaos, instruments tuned by the whispers of the gods. Even Wolverine, crouched and calculating, felt the energy prickling along his spine, urging him to abandon hesitation, to strike faster, to kill without mercy. The first wave of Imperial survivors tried to regroup. Bolters fired, flammers spat fire, and the ground shook with the impact of shells. But the champions were no longer mortal. Hulk absorbed every strike, sending shockwaves back through the enemy lines, while Wolverine moved like a predator in a dream, claws slashing, strikes precise, anticipating every move before it occurred. The warp pulsed, feeding them, amplifying every instinct, turning rage into divine purpose, precision into lethal art. The eye of terror pulsed in response, its energies flowing like rivers of light and shadow across the ruined city. Buildings twisted subtly, responding to the champion's motion. The air thickened, almost tangible with the presence of the gods, as though reality itself had bent in recognition of the communion taking place. The warp feast intensified. Khorne's fire poured into Hulk, making his muscles swell beyond natural limits, fusing his rage with divine strength. Every step he took left the ground quivering, each roar became a force of nature, bending matter itself. Slaynish's energy coiled around Wolverine, sharpening his senses, enhancing reflexes, making every swing of his claws perfect, every leap, every strike, a manifestation of predatory perfection. Hulk's roar split the horizon, echoing across molten rivers, shattered spires, and smoking ruins. The reverberation carried not just through air, but through the warp, binding raw fury into a conduit of divine force. Wolverine's claws flashed through the air, cutting down soldiers, machines, and corrupted servitors alike, each movement guided by the whispers of Slaanesh, yet tempered by his will, his discipline, and his predatory instinct. The people of Varkos Prime watched from the shadows, hidden and trembling, some fainting from awe, others pledging themselves in worship. They did not understand the energy, the fury, or the precision, but they felt its weight in every tremor, every flash of destruction, every echoing roar. The champions were no longer two beings. They were avatars, extensions of the will of chaos itself, perfected instruments of rage and predation. The warp itself seemed to pulse with satisfaction. Rivers of psychic energy wove through the city like molten veins, coiling around Hulk and Wolverine, enhancing every movement, every strike, every breath. Even the terrain responded, bending subtly to accommodate their destructive dance. The Lehman Russ tanks that remained tried to fire, but shells were redirected mid-air, crushed by shockwaves, or evaporated by psychic force. Hulk lifted a fallen Titan chassis effortlessly, throwing it across the plaza where it collided with reinforced fortifications, sending debris flying in arcs of molten fire. Wolverine leapt, slicing through remaining squads, turning each attack into an exhibition of lethal grace. The whispers of the gods caressed them, sharpening Hulk's fury, heightening Logan's senses, binding the two champions further into a symbiosis of rage and precision. The Eye of Terror pulsed with approval. Khorne and Slaanesh had forged something unique, a duo of chaos, unstoppable, fused by the psychic feast that had consumed them. They had crossed the threshold. They were no longer mortal, no longer limited by instinct or restraint. They were living conduits of divine power, their strength, speed, and lethality now amplified beyond reason. As the last pockets of resistance fell, the champions stood amid the ruined hive. Hulk's chest heaved with divine fury, his eyes blazing emerald as the power of Khorne surged within. Wolverine crouched, claws dripping, senses sharpened by Slaanesh's whispers, the predator perfected, tempered by his own will. The warp hummed around them, and the Eye of Terror seemed to lean closer, watching, approving, feeding the bond further. The warp feast had ended. Hulk and Wolverine were no longer merely champions. They were avatars of chaos. Their abilities had been amplified beyond mortal limits. And the galaxy, still unaware of their full potential, would soon feel the consequences of their unleashed fury. The horizon burned with green and violet light, a warp-streaked sky pulsing with the heartbeat of unholy power. Hulk and Wolverine advanced across the shattered plains of the Imperium, their steps bending the terrain beneath them. Kale Tor lay behind them, a ruinous testament to their fury, but ahead was a prize far greater, Cadia. The fortress world that had held the line for millennia. The bastion of the Emperor's might. The heart of the Imperium's resistance against the warp. Hulk moved first, every step a hammer of divine fury. Mountains quaked, rivers of stone and molten earth flowed unnaturally, shards of debris leaping into the sky with the force of his advance. Khorne's influence surged through him, turning instinct into perfection, rage into a calculated instrument of destruction. Each breath, each movement, each roar amplified the whispers of the god of war, binding him further to fury and bloodshed. Wolverine followed, predator perfected, claws flashing in the warped twilight of the eye. Slaynish's whispers coiled around his instincts, enhancing reflexes, sharpening precision, turning every strike into an art of lethal perfection. His eyes glimmered with anticipation, as if the thrill of annihilation was a feast he had been born to savor. Together, the champions moved as one, muscle and metal, claw and fury, bound to the will of the warp and its gods. The first defenders of Cadia were already aware of their approach. Signals flared across the planet, alarms echoing through the fortress cities, the great bastions of the Cadian regiments scrambling for position. Tanks rolled out, bolter lines formed, and artillery opened fire. Hulk paused only for a heartbeat, fists striking the ground to send shockwaves through the advancing columns, crushing tanks like toys, scattering infantry into molten streams and jagged rock. Wolverine darted between fire and debris, slashing through armored ranks, every move a calculated dance, every strike a declaration of predatory supremacy. The warp pulsed in resonance with their advance. Green and violet energy coiled around them, threads of power amplifying the force of their steps. Reality itself bent to accommodate them. Even gravity seemed to yield, allowing Hulk's leaps to crush entire squads, while Wolverine moved with inhuman speed and lethal intent. As the champions approached the outer bastions of Cadia, the defenders fired everything they could muster. Missiles arced toward Hulk, bolters spat fire at Wolverine, and artillery shook the earth with relentless bombardment. Hulk's fists absorbed the impacts effortlessly, sending ripples of kinetic energy through the ground, throwing armored units into molten chasms. Wolverine moved with surgical precision, slicing through war gear and flesh alike, anticipating every counterattack with the instincts of a predator honed by centuries. The first wave fell in seconds. Hulk's roar split the air, echoing through the canyon-like streets of Cadia. Wolverine's claws flashed with deadly elegance, leaving trails of ruin in his wake. The defenders' morale faltered as the impossible strength and coordination of the champions became undeniable. They were more than warriors. They were avatars, instruments of chaos, their combined might bending the world around them. Chaos itself surged to meet them. The eye pulsed violently, feeding power into Hulk and Wolverine, twisting the air, distorting the landscape, sending tendrils of warp energy to reinforce their strikes. The green glow of Khorne enveloped Hulk's fists, each punch tearing through armor and stone alike. Slaynish's touch danced along Wolverine's nerves, enhancing reflexes, sharpening instincts, turning his strikes into instruments of sublime precision. Even the very land of Cadia responded. Fortress walls groaned, spires cracked, and streets bent under the combined influence of mortal fury and divine chaos. The first few Imperial Guard regiments were annihilated before they could even fire in coordination. The shrieking of servitors and the screams of soldiers echoed across the shattered plains, amplified by the warp as it coiled around the champions. Hulk lifted a massive Titan chassis, hurling it into the central command of a fortified guard station. Explosions tore through stone and metal, lighting the surrounding streets in flashes of fire and molten debris. Wolverine followed, leaping onto the upper walls, claws rending steel and bone, leaving chaos in every step. Their synergy had become perfected, fury and precision intertwined by the whispers of Khorne and Slaanesh. The surviving defenders faltered, retreating toward inner bastions. Hulk and Wolverine pressed forward relentlessly. The landscape itself seemed to bend to their passage, splintering walls, rupturing streets, and boiling rivers as their power grew. Every attack reinforced the other, every roar and slash a testament to the growing dominion of chaos incarnate. By the time the champions reached the central spires of Cadia, the planet itself seemed to shudder in acknowledgement. Warp energy coalesced into flowing currents, feeding the fury and precision of Hulk and Wolverine further. The defenders who remained looked upon the two as gods, terrifying avatars whose power exceeded reason, whose presence demanded submission or death. Hulk paused, surveying the devastation, chest heaving, muscles coiled like steel springs, green fury blazing with divine intensity. Wolverine crouched, claws dripping, eyes scanning the horizon for the next wave. The bond forged in Kael'tor and refined in Varkos Prime had reached its apex. Their rage and precision were now a single, unstoppable force. The march toward Cadia had left a path of ruin, a scar across the planet and across the minds of its people. The galaxy would remember the names of the two champions, the Fury and the Predator, the avatars of chaos who had begun their reign of destruction. The eye of terror pulsed in approval, threads of warp energy coiling around the central bastion, acknowledging the unstoppable force that had emerged. Hulk roared once more, Wolverine's claws flashed in deadly synchrony, and Cadia, the bastion of the Imperium, trembled beneath the unrelenting march of chaos. The sky above Cadia burned with the colors of the warp, a searing tapestry of green, violet, and black, torn open by the presence of Hulk and Wolverine. The ground trembled with every step Hulk took, and Wolverine moved like a shadow through the smoke and debris, claws slicing through armored infantry, servitors, and barricades alike. The air was thick with ash, ozone, and the hum of psychic energy, the eye of terror itself bending and twisting reality to amplify their presence. From the heavens, a figure descended. Golden armor gleamed even through the haze, wings of psychic energy flaring behind him. The Primarch stood taller than any man, his visage radiating authority, discipline, and power refined over millennia. Robust and imposing, he surveyed the devastation below, calculating strategy and anticipating the champion's movements. He had faced countless foes, from traitor legions to warp beasts, but nothing could prepare him for the raw, unfiltered power before him. Hulk's roar split the sky as he advanced, muscles tensed, every movement infused with Khorne's divine fury. The Primarch raised his blade, a relic of impossible craftsmanship, its edge humming with psychic energy. Bolts of green lightning from the warp danced across the battlefield, twisting the air, bending light, and distorting perception. Wolverine crouched at Hulk's flank, claws extended, senses sharpened to a supernatural edge by Slaanish's whispers, anticipating every counter, every defensive strike. The first clash was titanic. Hulk's fist met the Primarch's blade with the force of mountains colliding, shockwaves tearing through the surrounding terrain. Wolverine leapt, claws aimed at weak points in the Primarch's armor, only for the strike to be blocked by an aura of psychic shielding. The air itself seemed to scream with energy, bending and twisting around the combatants. Every impact sent debris flying, structures collapsing, and soldiers thrown like rag dolls across the battlefield. The Primarch unleashed his psychic might, waves of energy radiating outward in precise, disciplined patterns. Hulk staggered only briefly, muscles flexing, fists slamming the ground to absorb the kinetic backlash. The rage within him roared louder, responding to the psychic pressure with raw force. Wolverine moved like a living blade, anticipating the undulations of the Primarch's psychic strikes, dodging, leaping, and countering with surgical precision. The first wave of Imperial Guard who had tried to follow the Primarch were annihilated, flung into molten rivers or crushed beneath rubble. Hulk's roar was not just sound, but a living wave of destruction amplified by Khorne, each vibration weakening the Primarch's psychic constructs. Wolverine's claws danced through the air, cutting chains, slicing servitors, and tearing through warp-enhanced armor. The Primarch was formidable, but the champions were no ordinary opponents. The fusion of Hulk's rage and Wolverine's lethal precision, enhanced by chaos, was beyond calculation. Every strike, every maneuver was anticipated, as if the eye itself guided their actions. The Primarch's psychic shields strained against the assault, fracturing under the relentless barrage. Hulk's fists smashed into the ground near his feet, sending shockwaves that twisted reality, bending space and terrain alike. Wolverine leapt, landing on a ruined spire to strike from above, claws rending armor and psychic energy in one precise motion. The Primarch retaliated, a swing of his weapon augmented by psychic might, tearing through rock and air, but even this assault only intensified the champion's synchronization. The bond of fury and precision had grown stronger, a feedback loop of instinct and chaos feeding itself. The battlefield trembled beneath their clash. Mountains cracked, rivers of molten rock boiled, and the air itself vibrated with the tension of unbound power. The Primarch's strikes became faster, more refined, but every movement was countered by Hulk's immense strength or Wolverine's predatory reflexes. Chaos whispered, urging them onward, pushing rage and precision into a single, unstoppable wave of force. The first direct blow struck the Primarch, Hulk's fist colliding with armor and psychic shielding alike, sending him staggering across the shattered terrain. Wolverine leapt, claws piercing the protective aura, leaving lines of scorched energy etched into the golden armor. The Primarch fell to one knee, gritting his teeth against the assault, blood and psychic energy mingling in a storm around him. Even as he struggled to rise, Hulk and Wolverine pressed forward. Their movements were synchronized, rage and precision perfectly fused, amplified beyond the limits of mortal comprehension. The Primarch swung, bolstered by centuries of training and psychic discipline, but every strike was anticipated, countered, or absorbed. The champions moved as if guided by the eye itself, their combined will unstoppable, each attack a testament to the terrifying scale of their might. The final clash ended with the Primarch sprawled across the shattered plaza, breathing heavily, psychic energy drained, armor fractured, unable to withstand the fusion of Hulk's fury and Wolverine's lethal precision. The surviving forces of the Imperium fled or fell silent in awe, their morale shattered by the undeniable reality before them. Hulk roared, the sound echoing across mountains and valleys, a declaration of dominance, a call to the forces of chaos. Wolverine's claws gleamed, dripping with the evidence of battle, his senses alert to any threat that might yet arise. The Primarch's failure was a signal, a testament to the terrifying power that these new champions wielded. Chaos had not merely touched them, it had made them avatars, instruments of destruction, and the galaxy had just witnessed their first true display of supremacy. The eye of terror pulsed in satisfaction. Hulk and Wolverine had proven that even the mightiest of mortal champions could fall. Their rage and precision were now fully realized, and the Imperium would never forget the scale of their power. The battlefield of Cadia lay in ruin. Shattered streets, toppled fortifications, and rivers of molten metal stretched across the plains, a testament to the unstoppable might of Hulk and Wolverine. The sky above pulsed with warp energy, green and violet tendrils coiling through the air, reflecting the chaos that had consumed the world. The champions stood amidst the devastation, their forms towering, their senses heightened, their connection to the eye of terror and the chaos gods now absolute. Hulk's muscles rippled with unrestrained power, veins glowing as Khorne's fury fused with his rage. Every breath he drew, every movement he made, carried the weight of destruction itself. The whispers of the god of war were no longer suggestions, but directives, bending his instincts, honing his fury into precise and unstoppable strikes. He had become more than flesh and bone. He was the embodiment of rage made manifest, an avatar of carnage that the galaxy had never witnessed. Wolverine crouched beside him, claws extended, the whispers of Slaanesh coiling through his mind, enhancing reflexes, heightening senses, and sharpening instincts. Pain and pleasure blended seamlessly into lethal awareness. Every slash, every leap, every attack was a dance of death and precision, calculated instinct and warp-augmented savagery intertwined. The Predator had become divine, a living instrument of Slaanesh's will. The Eye of Terror pulsed in acknowledgement. Warp tendrils wrapped around the champions, flowing through Hulk's muscles, through Wolverine's nerves, binding their fury and precision into a singular rhythm. The landscape itself responded, streets warped beneath Hulk's steps, buildings twisted to accommodate Wolverine's movements, rivers of molten metal shifted unnaturally, flowing around debris as if guided by invisible hands. From orbit, Imperial forces watched in horror. Ships fired upon the champions, bolters and lances blazing, but every strike was anticipated, every trajectory countered. Hulk's massive fists sent shockwaves through the air, diverting missiles and throwing armored vehicles aside. Wolverine moved like a shadow, claws tearing through engines, weapons, and soldiers alike, slashing pathways through death and destruction with deadly grace. The whispers of Khorne and Slaanesh reached a crescendo. The champions felt it, not as mere suggestion, but as a binding force, an infusion that elevated their rage and precision beyond mortal comprehension. Hulk's roar shattered the remaining defensive lines, the sound vibrating through metal, stone, and flesh alike. Wolverine's claws gleamed, cutting arcs through the chaos, leaving trails of devastation in perfect rhythm with Hulk's fury. The surviving Imperial Guard attempted to retreat, but even as they ran, their efforts were futile. Hulk crushed tanks and artillery with unrelenting force, sending soldiers scattering in every direction. Wolverine darted between them, slicing through units with surgical precision, each attack calculated, instinctual, and enhanced by warp-infused energy. The champions moved in perfect synchronization, a dual storm of chaos and lethality, unstoppable and inevitable. Above them, the Eye of Terror writhed and pulsed. Warp currents coalesced into rivers of energy that wrapped around the champions, strengthening their connection to the gods, amplifying rage, refining instincts, and enhancing every physical and psychic ability. Hulk's muscles expanded further, his green skin shimmering with divine energy. Wolverine's claws seemed to hum, slicing the air itself, and each movement left a subtle distortion in reality. The city of Cadia groaned under the assault. Buildings crumbled, streets split, and rivers of molten stone flowed like living veins. The defenders' morale collapsed. Even the most stalwart Astartes were driven to panic. The Primarch who had attempted to oppose them earlier now lay retreating, his psychic energy flickering against the overwhelming power of the champions. Every strike, every roar, every slash was a demonstration. Hulk and Wolverine were no longer mortals. They were living avatars of chaos, instruments of destruction sculpted by the will of Khorne and Slaanesh. The citizens who remained, hiding in the ruins, fell to their knees in fear and awe. They whispered names they dared not speak aloud, marking the champions as gods, demons, or something in between. Chaos had claimed not just their minds but their devotion, and the cults that would form around Hulk's fury and Wolverine's lethal grace were already stirring. The battlefield became a tableau of divine destruction. Hulk smashed the last defensive positions with calculated rage, each strike guided by instinct yet honed by Khorne's influence. Wolverine moved like liquid death through the ruins, every slash precise, every movement calculated, dancing with Slaanesh's whispers yet governed by his own will. The bond forged in Kael Tor, honed in Varkos Prime, now reached its apex, Fury and precision merged, rage and predation perfected, unstoppable. The Eye of Terror pulsed one final time in acknowledgement. Hulk and Wolverine stood atop the ruined spires, surveying the devastation, their bodies pulsing with divine energy, their presence bending reality itself. They had become champions, avatars, instruments of chaos, and the galaxy would soon remember their power, their names, and the destruction they could unleash. Hulk roared, a sound that shook mountains and warped air. Wolverine's claws gleamed in unison, a signal of lethal readiness. The champions had ascended. The path of carnage had only just begun. The Imperium would soon face the full might of chaos incarnate, and nothing would stand in their way. The void above Terra churned with war and anticipation. Fleet after fleet of Imperial vessels glimmered against the blackness of space, their hulls bristling with weapons capable of annihilating worlds, their banners snapping in the vacuum, a testament to the Imperium's resolve to defend its throne world. And yet, the Eye of Terror pulsed, twisting reality, as Hulk and Wolverine approached through a rift of green and violet energy, their presence alone bending the laws of physics and defying comprehension. Hulk's massive frame tore through the atmosphere, leaving trails of molten debris and warped air in his wake. His green skin shimmered with the influence of Khorne, each movement a strike of unrelenting force, each roar reverberating across the void and into orbiting fleets. The hulls of Imperial ships shuddered, their shields flickering against the intensity of his arrival. Wolverine followed, moving with impossible speed, claws extended, slicing through void suit exteriors, turrets, and energy conduits alike. The whispers of Slaanesh enhanced his reflexes, heightening instincts beyond mortal limits, making each strike precise, elegant, and lethal. The champions were no longer bound by gravity or distance. They were living storms of chaos, traversing the void as effortlessly as predators through the shadows. The first Imperial vessels opened fire, lances of plasma and barrages of shells arcing toward the champions. Hulk absorbed the impacts, fists smashing against energy shields, shockwaves rippling through nearby ships, tossing them like toys through the void. Wolverine darted between fire and debris, claws slicing engines, slicing control systems, leaving chaos and destruction in his wake. Every attack was anticipated, every counter absorbed, their fusion of rage and precision operating in perfect synchronization. The warp pulsed around them, a living entity responding to their presence. Rivers of green and violet energy twisted across space, coiling around Hulk and Wolverine, feeding them, amplifying their abilities, and bending reality to accommodate their movement. The Imperial fleets were formidable, trained, disciplined, and enhanced with centuries of experience and technology, yet they were ill-prepared for avatars of chaos who had been perfected by the gods themselves. The void around the battle warped under the champions' influence. Ships that fired upon Hulk were thrown off course by shockwaves, tanks and orbital guns detonating prematurely, their crews thrown into debris-filled airlocks. Wolverine leapt onto the hull of a frigate, claws tearing through reinforced plating, cutting corridors and killing sentries before they could react. Hulk's fists smashed through another battleship, sending molten fragments into nearby vessels. The first wave of the Imperium's defenders faltered, their formations crumbling under the unrelenting onslaught. The champions moved with deliberate coordination. Hulk was the hammer, his rage focused and unbound. Wolverine was the blade, his strikes precise, calculated, and merciless. Together, they reshaped the battlefield, turning orbital defenses into shattered wreckage, their synergy enhanced by the whispers of Khorne and Slaanesh. The sky above Terra seemed to warp in response, currents of warp energy bending the light, twisting perception, disorienting the defenders. Every volley fired from the Imperial fleet was anticipated, neutralized, or redirected by the combined instincts and raw power of the champions. Even the might of the void, the vacuum of space, seemed to bend in deference to their unstoppable advance. Hulk's green eyes glowed with divine intensity, muscles coiling and flexing as Khorne's fury sharpened his focus. He tore through frigates and cruisers alike, each strike releasing shockwaves that shattered weapons, hulls, and crew. Wolverine moved like liquid death, claws slicing through command centers and control decks, eliminating targets with lethal elegance, and leaving a trail of destruction that defied any tactical comprehension. The warp itself responded, pulsing with anticipation. It wrapped around the champions, fusing rage and precision into a single unstoppable entity. Streams of green and violet energy reached toward Terra, bending the planet's atmosphere subtly, preparing the world for the coming storm of chaos. The champions were no longer mere mortals. They were divine instruments, avatars of the chaos gods, manifestations of wrath and precision designed to challenge the very Imperium. The defenders tried to regroup, attempting to form defensive lines around orbital fortresses. But Hulk's leaps shattered entire sections, and Wolverine's claws cut through the power conduits that controlled weapons and shields. Chaos flowed through them, enhancing every movement, every reflex, every strike. Nothing could withstand the assault, nothing could counter the combination of rage and lethal precision. As the champions tore through orbital defenses, the first planetary shield generators collapsed, sending energy arcs dancing across the void. Hulk's fists smashed through one station after another, each strike creating shockwaves that disrupted enemy targeting systems. Wolverine leapt between the debris of destroyed vessels, slicing through remaining defenses with speed and precision, every movement a calculated display of predatory lethality. The first line of defense was gone. The second and third trembled before engaging, already weakened by the initial onslaught. The eye of terror pulsed with approval, its tendrils of warp energy coiling around the champions, feeding their rage and sharpening their instincts. Hulk and Wolverine had become unstoppable avatars of chaos unleashed upon the Imperium, their fusion of fury and precision bending reality itself. The siege had begun. The orbital defenses of Terra, proud and ancient, had fallen before the champion's might. Hulk roared, a living storm of rage resonating across space, and Wolverine's claws gleamed in deadly synchronicity. The galaxy would soon witness the fury of chaos incarnate. Terra itself would tremble. The champions had arrived. The Imperium's might had been tested, and the age of chaos had begun. The skies above Terra flickered with unnatural light, green and violet currents of warp energy stretching like veins across the heavens. Hulk and Wolverine moved as unstoppable forces, their presence warping reality itself, sending ripples across the void that even the most disciplined Imperial fleets could feel. Beneath them, the Mechanicus had begun their response, deploying their constructs, massive war machines, servotomata, and ancient titans, designed to defend the planet against any incursion. Yet these constructs would not remain neutral for long. The first titan lumbered forward, gears grinding, plasma cannons charging. Its sensors locked on Hulk, calculating trajectories and lethal impact. Hulk's eyes glowed emerald, muscles tensing with divine fury, amplified by Khorne's whispering voice in his mind. He charged, fists swinging with the force of mountain-sized hammers, and the Titan shuddered under the impact, circuits sparking as the energy of rage collided with technology. Wolverine darted around, moving between servitors and smaller constructs, claws slicing through servo limbs, piercing power cores, each strike precise, calculated, enhanced by Slaanish's whispers of lethal perfection. The smaller machines convulsed, some tearing themselves apart under the influence of the warp, their programming corrupted by the energy coiling from the champions. The warp pulsed stronger. Green and violet threads wrapped around Hulk and Wolverine, linking to every construct within range. Khorne's fury fused with Hulk's strength, while Slaanish's whispers guided Wolverine's deadly precision. The champions no longer simply fought. They became conduits of chaos that reached into the very circuits of the Mechanicus war machines. Control systems overloaded, protocols fractured, and machines that had been loyal to the Imperium began moving in twisted harmony with their new masters. Hulk lifted a Titan by its legs, spinning it like a toy before smashing it into a squadron of servitors. Plasma fire erupted in arcs, shields faltered, and circuits overloaded. Wolverine slashed through command panels, severing control lines, and the machines began responding to the champion's movements instinctively. Every hammer strike, every clawed swipe became a command, turning war machines into extensions of flesh and fury. The surviving Mechanicus troops tried to resist. They unleashed volleys of plasma and lasgun fire, activated defense protocols, attempted to reclaim control of the corrupted constructs. But the Eye of Terror pulsed through the champions, binding Hulk's rage and Wolverine's precision to every mechanical limb. Even the most intricate machinery obeyed instinct and will, bending to the dual force of chaos incarnate. They moved as one, a single, unstoppable army of muscle, claws, and steel. A squad of Castellan robots activated nearby, their ancient logic attempting to predict and counter the champion's assault. Hulk's fist smashed the first, sending it tumbling into molten debris, while Wolverine leapt onto the second, slicing through reinforced plating and servomotors alike. The warp fed into the machines, warping their programming, turning precision protocols into instruments of destruction, every pulse, every motion guided by the champion's combined will. The battlefield quaked. Buildings, spires, and streets trembled under the weight of unleashed fury. Hulk and Wolverine moved in perfect synchronization, their steps, swings, and leaps mirrored by the corrupted machines. A wall of mechanical Astartes advanced, once loyal, now instruments of the champion's rage. Every strike Hulk delivered was matched by servitor hammers, every slash of Wolverine's claws accompanied by chainswords and power axes swinging in unison. From the sky, orbital lances fired, but they were intercepted mid-flight by energy pulses redirected through corrupted circuits. Bolters and plasma cannons misfired, exploding before reaching the champions. Even the void itself seemed to bend to the fusion of rage, precision, and machine, creating a battlefield where mortality, technology, and chaos were indistinguishable. The Eye of Terror pulsed in recognition. Its threads of warp energy coiled and reinforced Hulk and Wolverine's connection to the constructs, binding flesh and metal into a singular force of destruction. The champions had become more than warriors. They were gods of carnage and predators of perfect precision, able to manipulate both organic and mechanical beings alike. Hulk's roar split the air, a wave of kinetic energy that sent the last resisting Titans sprawling. Wolverine slashed through the command deck of another, severing control systems and bending the remaining constructs fully to their will. The population of Varkos Prime, hiding in fear, witnessed a power beyond comprehension. Chaos had not merely corrupted them, it had elevated them, and now the champions controlled an army of machines that once served the Imperium. The battlefield settled into an unnatural harmony. Hulk stood, muscles taut, fists still crackling with Khorne's fire. Wolverine crouched beside him, claws humming with lethal energy, both aware that the corrupted Mechanicus war machines now answered to them alone. The Eye of Terror pulsed, approving the symbiosis, threads of warp energy stretching outward, ready to extend their dominion further. The Imperium had met its champions. The galaxy would soon learn that even the mightiest war machines could be twisted, corrupted, and turned against their masters. Hulk roared again, Wolverine's claws gleamed in deadly anticipation, and the God Machine army fell in line, marching alongside its living masters, instruments of chaos, avatars of destruction, unstoppable and unyielding. Above the shattered city, the warp shimmered and writhed. Every pulse of energy, every coil of corrupted circuitry, responded to the champion's will as though they were gods themselves. Even distant satellites bent subtly, their sensors flickering, systems trembling. The champions had not merely survived this encounter, they had conquered the domain, reshaping technology, instinct, and reality into a unified extension of their chaos. Hulk's massive fists clenched again, Wolverine crouched with predatory grace, and the God Machines around them hummed in alignment. The Eye of Terror itself seemed to lean closer, acknowledging the living avatars it had birthed. The stage was set for the next wave of annihilation. Chaos had won this battle. The champions had risen fully. The warp above Terra pulsed violently, a storm of green and violet energy coiling through the heavens. Hulk and Wolverine moved across the shattered orbital battlefields like forces of nature, their presence bending space itself, sending ripples of psychic and kinetic energy outward in all directions. Every Imperial vessel that dared confront them shook under the force of their combined might. Bolters, lances, and plasma cannons all fired, but even the most disciplined volleys were intercepted, deflected, or shattered before reaching the champions. Far below, in the Golden Throne, the Emperor stirred. His mind stretched across the Imperium, reaching into the warp, sensing the turbulent energy and the intrusion of the two champions. Hulk and Wolverine. He had felt the ripples of their rage, the unnatural perfection of their coordination, and he recognized the signs of chaos-infused mortals who had been elevated beyond all expectation. A low hum resonated through the throne, as if the planet itself sensed the confrontation of divine power about to unfold. The Emperor's psychic gaze pierced the warp, focusing on the two avatars of destruction. He could feel Hulk's rage, magnified beyond comprehension, each heartbeat resonating like the tolling of 1,000 war bells. Khorne's influence was clear, driving the Green Titan's fury into absolute perfection. Wolverine moved alongside him, every sinew and claw guided by Slaanish's whispers, sharp, lethal, and predatory. The Emperor reached for them, a wave of psychic force that would crush armies and bend minds. The champions paused, feeling it, a presence unlike any they had encountered, older than galaxies, more powerful than even the warp itself. Hulk's roar split the sky, a challenge and an acknowledgement all at once. Wolverine's claws flashed in unison, each movement deliberate, precise, and instinctively aware of the invisible weight pressing against them. The Emperor had arrived. From the Golden Throne, psychic currents surged outward. Hulk staggered briefly as the pressure washed over him, muscles tensing, green glow intensifying. The fury within him surged in response to the intrusion, not in fear, but in recognition of a challenge worthy of Khorne's blessing. Wolverine crouched, claws flexing, feeling the subtle tug at his instincts, the thrill of combat amplified by the Emperor's psychic presence. Slaanish whispered, urging him to embrace the exhilaration, to strike, to test the limits of mortal and divine alike. The Emperor's presence was a force of balance and absolute judgment, a psychic tidal wave designed to unmake those who dared challenge him. He could sense their fusion of rage and precision, the way Khorne and Slaanish had intertwined their wills, and the attempt to dominate such power was already overwhelming. It should have been enough to unseat them, to break them, to remind the galaxy that the Emperor was eternal. But Hulk did not yield. His green form surged forward, fists slamming against the currents of psychic pressure, a living bulwark of fury amplified by the warp. Each roar became a pulse that bent psychic energy, deflecting, redirecting, and transforming the Emperor's assault into raw, kinetic force. Wolverine moved alongside him, every step and slash calibrated, each movement weaving through psychic disruptions, slicing apart constructs, servitors, and warp-twisted debris alike. The champions had become more than mere mortals. They were avatars of chaos, their bodies and minds tuned to a resonance that rivaled even the Emperor's will. The Golden Throne's psychic projection intensified. Streams of golden light and thought surged toward the champions, attempting to break, to dominate, to enforce order and obedience. But the fusion of rage and precision, tempered by the whispers of chaos, was a force beyond conventional reckoning. Hulk's fists struck the flow of psychic energy like battering rams, shattering barriers, deflecting pressure, amplifying force. Wolverine leapt and struck at the edges of psychic constructs, his claws tearing through ethereal barriers, threads of Slaanesh-enhanced precision guiding every strike. Even the Emperor felt it, the strength, the fusion, the chaotic harmony that could not be broken. He had faced Primarchs, traitor legions, and demon hosts, but never a duo whose rage and lethal skill had been fused and amplified by the gods themselves. His mind reached deeper, probing, striking, attempting to enforce control, but each effort was met with resistance, each push countered by raw fury or precise predatory instinct. Hulk's roar shook the heavens. The Green Titan leapt through an orbital blockade, hurling enemy vessels into each other with unstoppable force. Wolverine followed, leaping between debris, slashing control systems, engines, and crew, the warp whispering, bending, and amplifying his deadly grace. The Emperor's psychic might strained against the combined force, yet the champions advanced, unbroken, unstoppable, moving with a speed and synchronization that defied comprehension. The warp trembled at the sight. The Eye of Terror pulsed, coiling around Hulk and Wolverine, feeding the fusion of Khorne's fury and Slaanesh's precision. Even the constructs and machines caught in the wake began moving in twisted obedience, extending the champions' dominance further. They had become avatars, living instruments of destruction, their rage and skill amplified beyond reason. The Emperor's presence shifted, focusing more intensely. He reached outward with a psychic tendril of unimaginable force, attempting to crush the champions' consciousness, to force them into submission, obedience, or oblivion. Hulk responded with a roar, a pulse of kinetic energy that bent reality. Wolverine sliced through the air, targeting psychic anchors and constructs alike. Their fusion was perfect, unstoppable, godlike. The battlefield, orbit, void, and shattered city alike quaked. Hulk and Wolverine advanced, deflecting, absorbing, and amplifying psychic energy with every movement. The Emperor had awoken, but even he found the champions' power overwhelming, their fusion of rage and precision exceeding expectation, their bond a singular instrument of chaos and devastation. The warp pulsed. The champions had survived the psychic onslaught, and in doing so, had proven that even the Emperor himself was challenged by their combined might. The galaxy trembled, and the Imperium would soon learn that its greatest defender had encountered avatars of chaos it could scarcely comprehend. Hulk roared into the psychic storm, Wolverine's claws flashed in deadly unison. The Emperor, sensing their raw potential and defiance, knew that containment would require more than conventional force. The champions had risen beyond mortal limits, beyond any Primarch, beyond any vessel of the Imperium. They were unstoppable. They were chaos incarnate. The sky above Terra shimmered, twisted, and warped as Hulk and Wolverine moved onward, their presence bending space and mind alike, a living testament to the power of chaos and the limits of even the Emperor's direct intervention. The battlefield above Terra had become a maelstrom of war, a fractured expanse of shattered orbital platforms, burning satellites, and twisted fragments of void vessels. The green and violet currents of warp energy pulsed through the void, each ripple bending light and time itself. Hulk and Wolverine moved with divine purpose, their fusion of rage and predatory precision resonating with the threads of chaos that had claimed them. Above, the Golden Throne's psychic presence stretched outward, a tide of golden light and thought reaching into the warp, manifesting the Emperor's will in an attempt to contain the unstoppable champions. Hulk felt it first, the psychic weight of the Emperor's mind, a presence older than stars, vast beyond comprehension. It struck against him like a tidal wave, pressing into muscle, bone, and mind. Khorne's whispers coiled tighter around his instincts, feeding rage, refining every movement, every strike, turning fury into divine precision. Hulk's fists struck platforms, shattering reinforced metal and sending debris spinning into the void. Each strike was a declaration. He would not yield. Wolverine crouched atop a shattered spire, claws extended, sensing the custodes descending in perfect formation. Golden armor gleamed, halberds and power weapons held with lethal intent. The Emperor's elite, perfect in skill and discipline, moved with coordinated precision, prepared to intercept the Chaos Champions and protect the throne. Slaynish's whispers flowed through Logan's mind, sharpening reflexes, heightening senses, amplifying the thrill of combat. He inhaled, eyes narrowing, ready to face the ultimate predators of Terra's defenders. The first clash erupted with the force of a planetary quake. Hulk swung, smashing a custodian squad with a single, earth-shattering blow, their reinforced armor cracking, limbs thrown into molten debris. The Emperor's psychic might lashed out, a golden wave of raw energy attempting to restrain him, but Hulk absorbed it, transforming the assault into kinetic fury. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, toppling satellites, crushing battalions, turning the void around him into a fractured storm of debris and energy. Wolverine leapt from platform to platform, claws slicing through halberds, piercing armor, anticipating every counter from the custodes with terrifying precision. Every strike was enhanced by Slaynish, yet guided by instinct and will, allowing him to cut a path through the Emperor's most elite defenders with lethal grace. The battlefield itself fractured under the strain of godlike strength. Space warped, platforms shifted, and energy arcs tore through the void, as Hulk and Wolverine clashed with forces that had never known defeat. The Emperor reached further into the warp, attempting to dominate Hulk's mind, bend him, contain him. Hulk's roar responded, a pulse that shattered psychic constructs, disrupting golden energy and sending shockwaves across the void. Wolverine's claws struck with deadly efficiency, each swipe dismantling custodes' formations, turning order into chaos. From orbiting platforms, bolters and lances fired in futile streams, destroyed mid-flight by the champion's overwhelming power. Hulk's leaps sent debris smashing through battalions, while Wolverine darted with fluidity unmatched, claws piercing armor and augments alike. Even the Emperor's psychic interventions struggled to contain them, unable to overcome the fusion of rage and precision amplified by the warp. The champions moved as one, Hulk the unstoppable force, Wolverine the calculated predator, their synergy perfect, godlike, unstoppable. The custodes fell back in awe and terror, their training, discipline, and psychic power insufficient against the living avatars of chaos. The battle was no longer between mortals. It was a confrontation of divine force versus divine force, rage and predation against the will of the Emperor. Hulk slammed into the Emperor's psychic constructs, every blow sending tremors across Terra's orbit, shaking satellites, bending energy shields, and leaving devastation in arcs of green and violet light. Wolverine darted through custodes' ranks, slicing through armor and halberds, his movement a lethal choreography of precision, each strike guided by instinct, Slaynish, and the flow of the warp. The Emperor's psychic might surged, attempting to strike Hulk, displace Wolverine, but the champions' bond had grown too strong, their combined power now capable of resisting even divine intervention. The battlefield fractured further. Floating debris collided, platforms twisted, rivers of molten metal from shattered ships flowed unpredictably. The warp itself screamed with energy, threads of chaos weaving through the champions, amplifying every strike, every roar, every movement. The custodes fought valiantly, but the scale of power they faced was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Hulk roared into the void, green fury crackling with divine intensity, sending shockwaves that shattered remaining orbital fortresses. Wolverine's claws flashed, severing cables, augments, and servitors alike, slicing through reality with predatory precision. The Emperor, sensing the scale of their might, paused, realizing that containment would require more than psychic force. The champions had transcended the limits of mortals, even the limits of divine guardianship. Hulk and Wolverine stood, briefly poised atop the ruins, the battlefield of space, orbiting constructs, and shattered defenses stretching around them. Their bond of rage and precision had reached perfection, the fusion of Khorne's fury and Slaaneish's predation now unstoppable. Even the Emperor's psychic will could not overwhelm them. They were avatars of chaos, living instruments of wrath and death, their names destined to echo across the galaxy. The Eye of Terror pulsed in approval, its threads of warp energy coiling tightly around the champions, recognizing the scale of devastation and power they now commanded. Hulk roared, Wolverine's claws gleamed in deadly synchronization, and the galaxy trembled beneath the rise of chaos incarnate. The sky above Terra was no longer a sky. It was a living storm of green and violet energy, torn and twisted by the titanic presence of Hulk and Wolverine. Oceans convulsed, their surfaces rippling as if alive, mountains shuddered and cracked, and cities bent and fractured under the weight of chaos energy that seeped into every stone, every spire, every street. The very fabric of reality groaned, stretched, and broke, reacting to the unbridled fury and predatory precision of the champions. Hulk moved across the shattered orbital platforms, his steps sending tremors across Terra's surface and through the void itself. Every movement carried the weight of Khorne's will, every roar a pulse of divine force that fractured both matter and energy. Wolverine followed, leaping across the fractured terrain, claws flashing with lethal grace, guided by Slaaneish's whispers, anticipating, striking, and dismantling with inhuman precision. The first cities to fall were the outer hive blocks. Skyscrapers twisted unnaturally, steel bending like wax, glass shattering into rain-like shards that burned with warp taint. The population screamed as streets ruptured beneath them, choking rivers of molten debris flowing through shattered avenues. Those who survived fell to their knees, pleading for mercy from powers beyond comprehension, their prayers caught in the storm of psychic energy that enveloped the world. The warp itself responded to the champion's presence. Green and violet threads coiled around Hulk and Wolverine, amplifying their power and bending reality to their will. The oceans swelled and boiled, their waves rising impossibly high, twisting into impossible forms as they threatened to sweep across entire continents. Mountains folded in upon themselves, rivers reversed their courses, and entire forests shimmered with a ghostly, warp-touched glow. From orbit, Imperial forces attempted to respond. Strike cruisers and battleships fired volleys of lances and plasma, but their weapons faltered in the twisted currents of energy. The void itself seemed to bend, redirecting fire harmlessly, crumpling hulls before the champions even made contact. Hulk's fists slammed into orbital stations, shattering them with a single blow, while Wolverine darted between debris, slicing through critical systems with uncanny speed and precision. Even the most disciplined Astartes struggled. The custodes and elite units, trained for millennia, found their movements slowed, calculations failing, as the warp bent and fractured reality around Hulk and Wolverine. The champions were not just fighting forces, they were reshaping existence. Their fusion of rage and predation extended beyond flesh and muscle, into matter, into energy, into the warp of the universe itself. Hulk's roar split the fractured heavens, resonating through the oceans and mountains, sending shockwaves of pure fury into cities and forests alike. Buildings bent, streets fractured, and rivers boiled under the force. Wolverine leapt from a collapsing skyscraper, claws flashing through servitors, artillery, and orbital defenses, his speed amplified by Slaanish's whispers, his strikes precise and deadly, dismantling obstacles with effortless grace. The earth itself responded. Continents seemed to shiver, tectonic plates groaning, mountains folding and rivers twisting like serpents in motion. Cities cracked as their foundations warped, walls bending and twisting with the unseen force of chaos. Every object, every structure, every living being was caught in the tide of Hulk and Wolverine's fused power. From the depths of the warp, the Chaos Gods watched. Khorne's fire roared in Hulk's veins, Slaanish's ecstasy sharpened Wolverine's reflexes, and together, the champions became perfect instruments, avatars of destruction reshaping reality with every movement. Even the oceans, molten lava, and floating debris of shattered orbital platforms responded instinctively to their presence, aligning and bending to their will. Hulk raised a massive fist, slamming it into a mountain that had begun to shift and crack. The explosion sent shockwaves through nearby cities, toppling structures, rupturing streets, and hurling debris into the air. Wolverine leapt across the crumbling landscape, slashing through buildings, vehicles, and soldiers alike, each movement perfectly timed, calculated by instinct and warp-enhanced reflexes. The Imperial forces attempted coordination. Bolters fired, titans stomped, orbital lances rained energy, but every strike was neutralized by Hulk's fury or Wolverine's precision. The terrain itself had become an ally of chaos, responding to the champion's instincts, twisting and folding to create pathways, amplify strikes, and protect them from harm. Even the warp pulsed in recognition, its energy flowing into Hulk and Wolverine, amplifying rage and predatory skill beyond mortal comprehension. The scale of destruction was unimaginable. Entire oceans boiled and evaporated, mountains split as if reality were clay, and cities folded in upon themselves, their inhabitants crushed, terrified, or pledging themselves to chaos in desperation. Hulk and Wolverine moved across the planet and orbital platforms alike, unstoppable, godlike, a storm of rage and lethal intent that reshaped Terra. For a brief moment, the champions paused. The oceans churned, mountains quivered, cities fractured. Hulk's chest heaved, muscles tensed, eyes glowing with divine fury. Wolverine crouched, claws extended, sensing every movement, every shift in terrain, every ripple of the warp. They were not just warriors anymore. They were forces of reality rewritten, living avatars of chaos, bending the world to their combined will. The eye of terror pulsed in approval. Hulk roared again, Wolverine's claws flashed in deadly unison, and the planet of Terra itself seemed to groan under the overwhelming presence of chaos incarnate. Reality had fractured, oceans and mountains distorted, and cities bent beneath their power. The warp had been unbound. The galaxy would remember this day. The Imperium would feel the terror of two champions who had not only fought but rewritten reality itself. Hulk and Wolverine were unstoppable, avatars of rage and precision, living instruments of chaos, and the universe trembled beneath their unrelenting might. The local sector shuddered under the combined presence of Hulk and Wolverine. Planets, moons, and asteroid belts trembled, their orbits shifting subtly as if reality itself acknowledged the dominion of the champions. The skies above each world burned with green and violet streaks of warp energy, twisting light, distorting perception, and casting shadows that seemed to move independently, alive with malignant purpose. Hulk's massive fists clenched, veins bulging, muscles coiled like living steel, each heartbeat resonating with Khorne's divine fury. Wolverine crouched nearby, claws gleaming, eyes locked onto distant enemy positions, Slaaneish's whispers sharpening every movement into a lethal ballet of predation. The Imperium's forces across the sector attempted resistance. Ships fired barrages of plasma and lances, orbital fortresses unleashed torrents of bolter fire, and Space Marine detachments engaged the champions wherever they could. But every strike was anticipated, every attack countered, and every plan to contain or slow them crumbled beneath the combined might of chaos. Hulk smashed through armored cruisers, sending debris cascading into nearby worlds. Wolverine moved like a shadow across moons and orbital platforms, slashing through weapons, augments, and soldiers alike with surgical precision. The warp pulsed in resonance with the champion's fury. Green and violet tendrils flowed across planets, weaving into cities and armies, corrupting, enhancing, and bending reality to amplify their power. Hulk's roars echoed across the void, shaking orbital defenses and planetary crust alike, while Wolverine's claws struck with calculated lethality, cutting through enemy lines and precision targeting systems as easily as a predator tearing flesh. Every world they touched became a testament to chaos, a landscape reshaped by rage, precision, and divine influence. The citizens and remaining Imperial forces of each world were forced to kneel, pledging themselves to the champion's might, or perish under the unstoppable wave of destruction. Hulk advanced across the central cities, crushing fortifications, leveling districts with each step, the ground itself trembling beneath his divine fury. Wolverine followed, navigating the chaos with lethal grace, his every movement a demonstration of perfect predatory calculation. Resistance faltered further as the champion's influence extended. Warp energy wrapped around planets and orbital platforms, subtly manipulating gravity, light, and perception. Ships that fired against them misaligned mid-flight, colliding with one another. Fortresses' defensive shields flickered and failed, augmented constructs succumbed to the corrupting will of chaos, and even the most disciplined Space Marine units hesitated in the face of their unstoppable power. Hulk's fist shattered the central command tower of an orbital fortress, sending its crew tumbling into space, screaming as their life support failed. Wolverine leapt between defensive positions, slicing through control panels and operators with unmatched precision. The combination of rage and predatory skill had turned the battlefield into a living extension of the champions, machines, and mortals alike moving, falling, and reshaping reality around them. The warp itself responded to their dominance. Green and violet energy pulsed like veins through every planet in the sector, amplifying the champion's abilities, rewriting the laws of physics subtly to accommodate their movements. Mountains crumbled where Hulk struck, oceans boiled and twisted under his blows, and cities bent and fractured under Wolverine's lethal precision. Every attack, every leap, every roar reinforced the growing dominion of chaos, the sector becoming a living monument to destruction, power, and worship. The Imperium tried desperately to retaliate. Titans, void shields, orbital batteries, and strike cruisers attacked in coordinated waves. Hulk's fists deflected and absorbed the onslaught, shockwaves flinging ships and soldiers alike into molten rubble. Wolverine darted across the battlefield, cutting through armor and energy conduits with surgical efficiency, every movement synchronized with Hulk's destructive pulses. By the time the final defenses had fallen, the champions stood atop the highest spires of the shattered sector. Hulk's chest heaved with fury, muscles taut, green energy rippling along every vein and sinew. Wolverine crouched, claws extended, senses alert to even the faintest ripple of resistance. The warp pulsed in approval, coiling around them, reinforcing the fusion of rage and predatory skill, and bending the entire sector to their unchallenged dominion. The population that survived either fled, cowered, or pledged themselves in worship. Ships, forts, and planetary infrastructure lay in ruin, repurposed and corrupted by the champion's presence. The Eye of Terror hummed, threads of energy extending outward, acknowledging Hulk and Wolverine as the living avatars of chaos for the entire sector. Hulk roared, a sound that shook planets and distorted space, while Wolverine's claws gleamed in unison, a deadly signal to all who dared oppose them. The champions had achieved full dominion. They were avatars of destruction, perfected instruments of wrath and predation, and the galaxy would tremble at their names. Every planet, every world, and every orbital installation bore the unmistakable mark of their passage. The sector was theirs, a testament to the overwhelming, unchallenged might of Hulk and Wolverine. Chaos had been realized in flesh, fury, and machine. Centuries had passed. The sector once dominated by Hulk and Wolverine lay in partial ruin, yet fragments of their devastation persisted, etched into planets, moons, and orbital platforms alike. Oceans boiled and reformed, mountains twisted unnaturally, cities rebuilt from warped materials carried the scars of chaos's touch. Even the air seemed different, tinged faintly with residual warp energy, a constant reminder that the Eye of Terror had once stretched its influence across the stars here. The warp itself hummed faintly across the sector, threads of green and violet energy lingering, a residual heartbeat echoing the fury and predation of two champions who had reshaped reality and defied even the Emperor's direct will. The Imperium had rebuilt, slowly, cautiously. Its forces were scattered across planets once lost, garrisoning what remained of orbital fortresses and haphazard colonies. Administratum records chronicled the horror and the awe of those days, though many accounts were fragmentary, corrupted, or lost entirely in the centuries of reconstruction. Legends spoke of the green giant whose rage had been bound to Khorne, a fury that could destroy worlds, and of the predator whose claws danced with Slaanisha's lethal grace, whose strikes could unmake battalions with surgical precision. These were not merely stories. They were warnings, lessons, and truths whispered to every recruit and astropath. Chaos could never be fully contained, and its champions, once born, were unstoppable. On Varkos Prime, the central hive city bore a subtle transformation. Warp energy still flickered in the streets at night, though faint, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Buildings retained twisted architecture, scarred and warped by the passage of Hulk and Wolverine, and those who lived there revered the legends in hushed tones. Some whispered prayers, not to the Emperor, but to the chaos-born champions, imploring strength, protection, or guidance. Others told stories of the green behemoth's fury, the razor-clawed predator's lethal grace, and how the two had walked as avatars of destruction across the stars, leaving entire worlds trembling in their wake. The Mechanicus noted subtle anomalies across the sector. Machines moved with inexplicable efficiency, sometimes even anticipating the needs of their operators before commands were issued. Some showed signs of fusion between flesh and metal, ghosts of the champion's influence lingering within circuits and war engines. They called it the Chaos Imprint, a phenomenon where rage and predation had left a permanent mark, machines and systems behaving unpredictably yet effectively, guided by patterns only Hulk and Wolverine could have left behind. The Adeptus Mechanicus quietly documented these anomalies, aware that the echoes of chaos were entwined with technological advancement, and that these traces might persist for generations, influencing construction, warfare, and even the thinking of future tech priests. The warp above the sector pulsed gently, a shadow of its former violent presence, threads of energy threading across stars and planets like veins of residual power. Some psychers reported visions, fleeting glimpses of the champions in action, Hulk's green form towering over shattered cities, Wolverine moving like shadowed lightning among ruins. The visions were terrifying and exhilarating, reminding the Imperium that these were no longer mortal beings. They had been elevated, fused with chaos, avatars of rage and precision who would exist in legend for all eternity. Records of battles remained, codices scattered among the archives of surviving Adeptus Administratum forces. They detailed orbital destructions, planetary sieges, the fall of entire regiments, and the corruption of Mechanicus constructs. But beyond facts and figures, there were stories, whispers of awe and terror. Priests, astropaths, and civilians spoke of the fusion of Hulk's unstoppable fury and Wolverine's lethal, predatory precision. The accounts were inconsistent, often contradictory, impossible to verify, yet all pointed to the same undeniable truth. These champions had walked as gods among mortals, and their legacy could not be erased. Centuries later, cadets training on Cadia or the surrounding sectors were still taught cautionary tales. They learned to fear the Green Titan whose wrath could crush entire armies, to respect the Predator whose claws could tear through fortresses, and to understand that the Imperium's might could falter in the face of chaos perfected. The champions' deeds had transcended mere history. They had become myth, a shadow cast across generations, a warning, and a testament to the enduring power of the warp. Hulk and Wolverine themselves had vanished, their forms lost to the currents of chaos and the Imperium. But their influence remained, encoded in the energies that laced the sector, imprinted on machines, on cities, and on the minds of those who survived. They had become more than mortals, more than champions. They were legends, eternal, untouchable, shaping the destiny of the galaxy even in absence. And somewhere within the warp, threads of green and violet energy pulsed faintly, echoing the rhythm of rage and predation that had once been flesh and bone. The galaxy remembered. The Imperium rebuilt. Chaos endured. And the names of Hulk and Wolverine whispered through the stars, forever etched in history as the avatars of wrath and lethal perfection, the Chaos champions who had walked among mortals and reshaped reality itself. Even centuries later, travelers reported strange phenomena. Ships would pass through areas where the warp lingered, systems behaving erratically, compasses spinning, augurs misfiring. Planets bore faint, unnatural tremors, and on the nights when the warp was calm, a green and violet shimmer could sometimes be seen, faint, almost like an echo of two living storms. It was a subtle reminder the champion's presence had never fully left. The Imperium rebuilt, but the shadow of rage persisted, and every generation remembered the fury and precision that had reshaped the stars.